Thank you for that introduction. And I want to thank the University of Rhode Island and the ATL for organizing and hosting this conference, and for their invitation and the opportunity to tell you about issues in biotechnology. Issues in biotechnology is an interesting course in many ways, as it's open to a general audience and it covers all of the major areas in biotechnology, from agricultural biotechnology and using genetic engineering of plants for crop improvement, and the controversy that brought about GMOs in food, to pharmaceutical biotechnology, recombinant DNA drugs, monoclonal antibodies, and new technologies for vaccine development, and a controversy for people who are perhaps opposed to vaccination, and medical biotechnology, stem cells, gene therapy, genetically engineering and cloning of animals, and the possibility of genetic engineering of humans. And again, another controversy. It seems that with many of the advances in biotechnology, there are often controversies associated with those. Isaac Asimov said that science gathers knowledge faster than society gathers wisdom. And I think that's especially apparent in the fields of biotechnology. So that's what makes this a great topic for a Gen Ed class. So before I get into that though, let me give you a little bit of background as to how this developed. I was having a conversation with the head of HR at Pfizer, and she said that what we really need is a general course on biotechnology for our non-science staff so that they will know what we do here. And I think this is an interesting statement for a couple of reasons. One, you can see an awkward position that perhaps HR might be in to have employees working for Pfizer that might be anti-vax. And actually this played out with Moderna during the pandemic and the production of the vaccine, where they had employees that were actually against it. Or you can imagine a similar situation with employees at Monsanto that are anti-GMO. So that's one issue related to the biotechnology industry, but there is another issue about an informed public, that these advances are happening very rapidly, and the controversies reflect, I think, a misinformed or underinformed public. So to address this would be a great course. And we decided that it needed to provide the basics to a general audience about biology and about biotechnology that would involve both the science and the non-science staff. And it needed to be fully updatable because biotechnology is changing all the time. And it also needed to be for a large audience and all-inclusive to have the most impact. So we formed a nonprofit organization with Pfizer as the charter sponsor called lifeedu.org and arranged the first presentation of this course at Connecticut College, attended by many of the employees from Pfizer. And this went really well. It was arranged more or less like an honors colloquium with invited speakers. And since that was so well received, we decided to launch it again at the University of Rhode Island. And that went really well, and I proposed it as a general ed course in 2004, and then joined the faculty at the University of Rhode Island in 2005, where I've been working on this course ever since, until in 2023, we made it into an asynchronous online version that was approved for national QM standards. And it's that version and the development that I want to talk with you about today. And so this course has been developed over time with a lot of refinements and improvements, experiments that I could do with things in class that worked and things that didn't work. So over time, this course developed to the point that it is today. And it's been offered both live and online since 2006, both as large enrollment gen ed courses for over 500 students each semester. And over this time, you see, this allowed for these continuous improvements, but also that I could adapt things that worked well in the live lecture and adapt them to the online version. For example, I would use iClicker polling devices or Top Hat and things like this to ask questions during class that the students could respond to. And right away, you get an immediate graph on the screen about their responses. And this was really good in the live lectures for involving the students in the material. And I parlayed that over into the online version to include study guide questions as well as polling questions during the lecture. And I'll show you about that in just a minute. But by offering these in parallel over this amount of time, it also set up a natural and ongoing comparison between the live and the online class. So it's a question that often comes up. Is live as good as online? That's what I hear a lot of. So we are presenting a comparative analysis of the outcomes for live in-person and online versions of this course in a poster that's in this conference that you could see later on this afternoon. So this summarizes the data that we used to compare the live version to the online versions. And I'll talk more about that in just a minute. But there is right now a growing demand, a growing international demand in all fields of science, technology, engineering, and math for general STEM courses. And this is being driven by a growing technological need for a qualified workforce. As the industry and as technology increases, so does the need for a qualified workforce. And as I pointed out, we have a general overall need to inform the general public about what's going on. The problem is, though, that there is a shortage of qualified instructors and limited financial resources at most universities to meet this demand. And I should point out that there are also strong needs for general education science platforms overall for the general courses like general bio, human anatomy, and physiology that are capable to be scaled up to meet the demand with large enrollments for all college STEM courses. So breaking away from limited enrollment to a large enrollment type of presentation is the need that's driving this type of innovation. The challenge then is to provide innovative, cost-effective solutions for the delivery as well as the assessments and student-student interactivity in the online version that would make this comparable to live education. The asynchronous online learning platform offers an attractive solution here and is well received by today's students. In fact, if I offer the live and the online version side by each and open for enrollment at the same time, the online version will enroll 3 times or more as many students as the live version. But the ongoing debate comparing traditional in-person learning with online learning continues. And I think this is increased, or at least continued, with the discussions about asynchronous online learning. But studies on this topic are relatively limited in comparison to all of the conversation that we hear about it. And I'll show you one of these studies that was published recently in the journal Science, comparing live and online education. Issues in Biotechnology is well suited as a course to address these challenges. The rapid and recent developments in biotechnology, after all, involve all of the STEM areas. And I think they're among the most provocative and socially relevant topics today as they pertain to all of us. And actually, that's what this presentation and this course are really all about. So I mentioned this previous study that's been done comparing live and online STEM courses. And this is from a group in Russia that's looking to develop large platform online courses for STEM instruction with equivalent learning outcomes at a lower cost. They're facing the same challenges that we all do. So looking at various STEM courses and comparing those for in-person, blended, and online, we see similar outcomes across all three modalities. And this was across several different STEM courses. Their results show outcomes from three measures: final exam scores, the average assessment scores, and student satisfaction. And in parentheses here, I say only, because as you'll see in a minute, our study is particularly data rich in comparison. And then he looked at cost effectiveness, comparing the presentation of in-person and blended. They see substantial savings for the online courses per 1,000 students per course. And this is their benchmark for a large enrollment course, being 500 and over. And I'll get back to that in a minute too. The learning objectives that I have for this presentation are that we should be able to identify and communicate the need for a general education online science platform. And that's basically what I just went over. And this platform needs to be able to scale college STEM instruction for large enrollment at lower cost. So I think given that that's what we just covered, I want to be able to check that box. Next, we should be able to assess and evaluate the asynchronous online issues in biotechnology courseware. And I'll show you this. And we want to evaluate this as a useful approach for this course and see how this might relate to other large enrollment STEM courses. And lastly, I'd like to connect with you to identify and synthesize linkages amongst us to foster a broader distribution, a broader dissemination of this course, and perhaps contribute to the innovation going forward. I'm looking for guest speakers. So our second goal, we want to be able to assess and evaluate the asynchronous online issues in biotechnology courseware. To do this, I want to show you about the content of the course. What exactly are we trying to convey? So the content subject material in this course is in the context of the social concerns that surround biotechnology. And this makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. And that this course then could be thought of as a science and humanities course for this kind of integration and across disciplines. Next, I want to show you how the course is run, the mechanics of this asynchronous online platform as it's presented in Brightspace as the LMS. And next, we want to examine how the course does in comparison to live traditional presentation. So we'll evaluate the learning outcomes and assessments from these three versions and a comparison to how the students respond to polling questions and discussion threads. I'll get into this in just a minute too, but this is related to student engagement. And finally, how do the students react? The response data from evaluations and student exit surveys. So first, let me tell you a little bit more about what this course is about. I mentioned it's a general education STEM course, but it's open to all majors and all academic years. with no prerequisites. Anybody can take this course. So I have art majors and business majors, science and non-science. I have nursing students and pharmacy majors, biology majors, and pre-meds that take this course. But it's not meant as a course to weed out biology majors or pre-med students. Rather, it's meant to give a perspective on biotechnology for everyone, to include the many perspectives on the broad ranges of topics in biotechnology. So in this way, it's purposefully intended to a broad general audience without watering down the content, but making it accessible to cover all the major fields in biotechnology and what is happening and what we project into the future. So to do this, this course has been designed to bridge the science with humanities. So the content of the course would look like this. It is divided into two parts, where in section 1, we're asking the very basic question, what is life? What is life? Sounds like a simple question. I would suggest that it's anything but. The deeper you get into this, the more serious it gets. And so what is life? How do you go from DNA out to an organism? How do you go from DNA out to any organism? An oak tree, a dog, a cat, or a human? So we want to understand the mechanics of DNA and how life works. So can we understand life from an understanding of how it works? Well, at least somewhat. And in here, if I am discussing DNA replication, I will follow this with some techniques in biotechnology as they have been adapted from nature itself. So for example, after discussing DNA replication, I might talk about techniques that are involved in biotechnology that more or less use the same processes, like DNA sequencing, PCR, and DNA cloning. In the first part, I'm also including aspects of social concerns, ethics, and philosophical questions that relate to these topics. So at the conclusion of part 1, we should have an understanding about life and how it works. And so in part 2, we are going to examine the applications in biotechnology. That is, how we work with life. So from agricultural biotechnology, where does our food come from in the first place? Through the domestication of wild plants and on to breeding, conventional breeding, and then to using DNA-based biotechnology for agriculture, genetic engineering in plants, and then the controversies that brings with GMOs in food. And then pharmaceutical biotechnology with small molecule drug design, recombinant DNA drugs, monoclonal antibodies, the mRNA vaccine, whose inventors received the Nobel Prize, but remains controversial to some people. And then medical biotechnology, stem cells, gene therapy, genetic engineering of animals for human organ donors, genetic engineering and cloning of animals, and the potential for genetic engineering of humans. And then cancer biology, how does it happen? And what are the emerging technologies for cures and treatments? And then DNA-based forensics. How is DNA used in matters of crime is of interest to a lot of people. And then the debate about DNA databasing. Is that in the interest of public safety or are there privacy concerns? And then finally, my famous last lecture, where I get to summarize all of this journey and project into the future what might be happening. So interspersed through all of this technology are various ethical questions and dilemmas and controversies that are rich for discussion. And I think controversies inevitably arise together, possibly with any new technology, but it seems especially with biotechnology. So this course serves to inform and debunk a lot of the misinformation and conspiracy theories we see around biotechnology, and inform rather than just disengage, but to address some of the misinformation we hear around biotechnology. And I've also included poetry with a poem in each lecture. And why poetry, you might ask, in a biotechnology course? Well, I would refer you to E. Cummings' Harvard Non-Lecture Series, 1952, for an explanation to that question. But suffice it to say that this is in agreement with bridging science with the humanities and making this a course that's accessible to broad perspectives. So let's look at how we can convey this type of information with the mechanics of an asynchronous online platform presented in the LMS system Brightspace. So what we've tried to do and make every effort to do is to streamline this course in such a way that when the student hits the Start Here button at the beginning of the course, they should be able to traverse and progress their way through the course nearly seamlessly. We have made every attempt to eliminate any ambiguity that could send a student to an email, realizing that for large-scale enrollment, you have to pay special attention to this. One email from 500 students creates quite a lot of work. So after they hit the Start Here button, this menu pops up, which presents a welcome and the learning objectives. The welcome to issues in biotechnology includes a short written explanation, but also a video that puts this course in the same context like what I just explained to you. And then these are the learning objectives for the course. These are the overall course learning objectives and what we need to accomplish in this class. And then there's a section on how this course works and a video which explains this to the students stepwise. So this is an asynchronous course, meaning that it does not meet. It's comprised of 11 lessons with 22 interactive studio lectures presented in PowerPoint. These lectures are approximately an hour long, covering each one of the topics. Each one of these lectures has interactive study guide questions inserted at various locations to, after I cover say a difficult topic, these questions are inserted more or less to check to see if we're all on the same page here before going forward with the rest of the video. These study guide questions are used to prepare the students for the quizzes. So there are 11 quizzes, one for each one of the lessons, a midterm exam, and a final exam. The midterm covers the first half, the final is not comprehensive and covers the second half. There's also an analytical project that involves the students in the stock market. Biotechnology is intimately associated with industry, and I think this exercise brings home that point, asking students to invest $100,000, fictitiously of course, across 5 biotechnology companies. So they look up their stock ticker symbol and the price that per share that stock is trading at, and calculate how many shares they can purchase, and then track that stock over the semester, and in the second part calculate their losses and gains over that semester. And the results here have been very interesting over the years as to how students do in investing in the stock market. And I can tell you, it's always been good. And I've been tempted at times to write this up as a Wall Street Journal article. The polling questions are also an interesting addition. While the study guide questions are meant to look at content and knowledge, the polling questions are more involved with subjective responses to opinions on things mainly. And these are included at the end of each lesson, and they must complete both the study guides and the polling questions before proceeding to the next lesson. And there are discussion threads, which I think this is another great addition for involving the students with an opportunity to talk with each other about some of these topics. So how does this look like to the student? Well, lesson 1, I'm entering the first lesson in the course. This menu pops up, which presents an overview of both of the lectures in this lesson and a to-do list. Also in the overview, we have the learning objectives for this lesson. And these learning objectives map back to the overall course learning objectives. Then there is the to-do list, which starts off with a schedule of activities, assignments, and due dates. The due dates are arranged on a weekly basis. We've experimented with different ways to present this, including opening the whole thing up, but we see that gating the students is helpful for tracking their progression. And we can use the intelligent agent function in Brightspace to also follow up with this. So in their to-do list, they can follow this progression and watch the interactive video and answer the inserted study guide questions. So these study guides, like I said, are embedded into each lecture, but there's also at the end of each lesson a pool of 40 study guide questions that they need to answer before the quiz will open. These study guide questions prepare the students for the quiz, but also this is, I think, the baseline knowledge that I want them to take away from this class. If the students know this part of the material, I'm good. And it's from these study guide questions that the quizzes are derived. So if they use the study guide questions, they're learning what I want them to know, and they will do well on the quizzes. The polling questions offer another opportunity. This is an opportunity to engage the students in what they're thinking about these controversial topics. And I can use these polling questions to cover a variety of topics. And I'll show you a little bit more about that when I get into the results. The discussion thread, I think, is also another great opportunity to involve the students with questions that they can discuss with each other. And as I've watched this ricochet through the course with the students, I'm really amazed at their insights and the provocative sorts of answers and questions that they generate. This is an interesting question. What divides our thinking about genetic engineering? And you notice that I don't have to ask, is our thinking divided about genetic engineering? So this is an interesting question that can be used in a discussion thread to see how the students also respond to this. So the assessments then for this course comprise the quizzes, the midterm, the final, and this analytical component through the stock project. And their participation in the polling questions and the discussion thread also counts towards their grade. So that's the class and how it works, teaching biotechnology. So how did they do? That's what everybody wants to know. How does the online version compare well to the live version? I can tell you, I love teaching this class live. I really do. So I was really interested to see how this transitions over into the online class, even though I've been doing it for a very long time. So in this assessment and the numbers that we put together for the poster presentation cover these different criteria for comparison, where across these criteria, the majority of these remain the same. The content's the same, the assessments, the quizzes, exams, the analytical project are all the same. The polling questions are the same. The professor's the same. So the difference is that the live class is presented live with PowerPoint lectures. They have a digital textbook that augments this with the studio lectures, but mainly they're relying on the regular in-class meetings and live PowerPoint lectures. The hybrid online version met 3 times and uses the detailed studio lectures in a digital textbook, and everything else being the same. The asynchronous online version has no class meetings and uses interactive studio lectures that have been approved and meet national QM standards. And I think this is an important criteria. And it also has included the discussion threads. So how do they do? If we look at the combined quiz results, the results from their midterm exams, and the results from the final exams, we can see, 1, that they all do quite well. 2, that the results are quite similar. So at least at this view, it appears as though the online versions are doing equally as well as the live presentation. And if we look at how they did in the stock projects, meaning did they all complete as the measure of participation in the stock project, not how much money they make, or lost, although that's interesting to look at. So they all actually completed their stock projects at roughly the same rate. When we look at the quiz averages, we can see that the online version actually does slightly better, statistically significant and slightly better. And we can also see this reflected in the midterm and the final exam statistics, where the online versions shoulder more tightly. And I think what this is reflecting, perhaps, is that the students in the online versions are paying more close attention to their study guides, meaning that they have to complete these before they take the quizzes, whereas the live students might not be paying as close attention to that. So that's an interesting data point. So these polling questions are interesting because we get to ask some pretty interesting questions across a wide range of different topics that I've categorized here. First, I like to look at the demographics, their academic year, their major, and a few other questions. They're simply demographics, but most of these topics relate to their opinions about things, on what they're thinking about different topics in this course. And a wide range of topics can be introduced this way, from biotechnology related questions like GMOs in food, or are you opposed to mandatory vaccination, or to health related questions like do you know anyone who has had cancer? Do you know anyone who has had cancer and survived? I'll show you those results in just a minute, and I think that's interesting too. But across these wide range of topics about what they're thinking and about what they're thinking about how they feel about some of this material. And I think this enhances student engagement the same way that it did during the live class when I was using iClicker devices and getting their responses. And so you can see from their answers, and I'll show you this, that they are engaged in answering these questions. And now I think that when we look at this, we can compare how the students are answering these questions in the live version compared to how they would answer these in the online version. And I think this, by looking at this, I think we can assess whether or not the students are as engaged online as they are in the live version. So it's a tool, I think, that by this comparative analysis, we can assess the degree of student engagement. You can look at this and see if you agree. But first, the demographics. In the year 2023, that we compressed all of this data for, the live in-person course enrolled mainly freshmen and sophomores, whereas the asynchronous course enrolled a majority of juniors and seniors. And the hybrid class was, hybrid. And then across these different topics, like how do they feel about careers, or different topics related to biotechnology. And what we can see in their responses, that these are all very similar, that the students seem to be responding in the online class similar to how they respond in the live class. So take, for example, this question: should we be manipulating the genes in animals for medical purposes, such as human organ donors or tissue donors? And this has been a topic of interest to meet the demand for human organs. So groups have been attempting this for decades to genetically engineer animals for human organ donors. And this headline just appeared in the New York Times literally just last week, announcing the first successes in this field, which actually might make dialysis obsolete in the future. So it's this type of question, you see, that is relevant to the current technology in biotechnology, and relevant to how students think about this. And I think one thing that we can notice is a high consistency in the responses. So what divides our thinking about genetic engineering? Do you know someone who's been affected by cancer? Do you know someone who's been affected by cancer and survived? Now look at this data. We see a concordance between the in-person and the online courses that is just absolutely striking. Some of these are within percentage points of each other, that they agree to that level. So we have a high level of student engagement. So obviously they are not just checking off boxes here, that they are engaging in the questions themselves, and that we can see that it is comparable to between the live and the online versions. And then this question: when does life begin? When does life begin as a human? Is that at fertilization? Is that at 6 weeks? Is that the first trimester? This is a question that divides the United States right now, if not the Supreme Court. And you can see by their responses that they are similarly divided. But this does indicate a high degree of student engagement in these polling questions. So this gives us some credibility about how the students are answering these types of questions. So realizing that, I think we can appreciate their responses to the exit surveys. So when asked whether or not this general survey course is relevant and pertinent for both majors and non-majors, they overall agree that this is a highly relevant course. In fact, in many of the written responses, students have often remarked that they thought that this course should be required for all students, and maybe even all people. And this is exactly what our goal was, after all. So, and when asked to rate this online course in comparison to all other online classes that they've ever taken, of course I didn't ask this question to the live course, but their responses are that they think this course was great and giving it a 10 out of 10. So in comparison to all other courses that they've had online, and realize that these students went through the pandemic. So they, when asked about if they thought that the study guides were helpful, they overall agree with that as well. And as with the polling questions being indicating that they thought that these were also good for the course. Now, when asked about the recorded studio lectures, both online versions thought they were very helpful. In comparison to the live version, who, of course, they had live lectures, and, so they didn't appreciate the studio lectures nearly as much as the online students, because they didn't have to. And then I asked them about their satisfaction in the course, like would they recommend this class to their friends? And overall, both groups say that this is highly recommended to their friends. And I experience this every semester when I get inundated by permission requests to add the course. So I think that by every measure, we've created a successful course. Then I was interested to know how the presentation of the course was received. And I was wondering that if I, as a professor, come across the same in my studio versions as I do in my live version. Like I said, I love teaching this class live, and so I was a little bit nervous as to how it would transfer over to the studio. So I can see that the students recognize that I'm at least intelligible, and that the online version also seems to be clear, and that students in both cohorts would give me an A for this class, which I think is great to see, because I'm glad to see that that the studio versions seem to be at least as well appreciated as the live version. But I don't really know how to feel about this, because I always prefer my favorite bands live, in comparison to the studio versions, but maybe that's just me. So I think Issues in Biotechnology is a great class to evaluate in terms of a Gen Ed STEM course for the function of looking at presentation online. As a general education course, it's an accredited 3-credit course that meets the requirement for natural sciences. And it's open to all majors and all academic years, and like I said, without prerequisites. And as it's intended for a general audience, this course is meant as an undergraduate level course. Most courses on biotechnology are offered for majors only, and typically for upperclassmen or graduate students. So I think this is a rare class that's intended for a general audience across all majors at an undergraduate level. And now we've made it into an asynchronous online class that's been specifically designed for large enrollment. Like I said, a lot of effort has gone into culling out bad questions or ambiguous instructions in Brightspace about how to get from here to there. We can have no ambiguity that would send a student back to an email. If you can eliminate these, as many as you possibly can, you're on the road to a large enrollment class. And then how do you scale this? How do you scale this from 500 students to 1,000 students to 10,000 students? So a class needs to be scalable and cost effective. And so the solutions that I've already presented for the mechanics of delivery and assessments and student-student interactivity seem to be working. And now we have a course that's been approved for national QM standards. So with all of this experience, people still ask me, how can you do this? How can you offer a class for 500 students effectively? Or worse, you can't do that. So we need to put this into context. So first, you can do this with the appropriate course design. And again, I have to emphasize, you need to pay extreme attention to anything that would send a student to an email. And then we also need a different sort of a management plan for a large enrollment asynchronous class. The traditional plan just simply isn't scalable. So how can you offer this as a class for 500 students? Well, one, I think meeting national QM standards is a good idea for involving student-student interactivity. And I think with the management plan involving a course coordinator, you can achieve much higher numbers efficiently than you can with a standard approach. So to the people that say I can't do this, I can say we have done this at a large scale effectively, and it's working. So then you might ask, how did we do this? Now, that's a better question. And to answer that, I want to show you how this scales. So if we look at a standard average live course presented at a university, we can see that a professor for a standard workload for, an average class, there are, this is an average. So there are obviously different classes have different criteria, but your average course for live instruction might be 50 students, might be your typical workload. So if you wanted to increase enrollment in a course like this, you could add a TA, a teaching assistant, and maybe double that. And this would be scalable by adding additional TAs, where you can increase enrollment by increasing the TAs that can handle the responses. Now, when you go to online, this doesn't change appreciably. An online class, especially for a class that involves a lot of student-student interaction, would require a professor to enroll about 50 students. And a hybrid online class is roughly about the same, and you could scale that up with additional TAs. And I think a blended online class might scale a little bit better because you have the recorded lectures to rely on. But roughly, this is the scale, and TAs are expensive, and they need to be trained all the time. They leave, And so the challenge to make this a large-scale asynchronous online class needs to involve a different plan. So for large-scale enrollment, we've used a management plan which separates the course content functions from the administrative functions. And in this way, can be cost-effectively scaled up. So by separating out the course content functions and relying on the professor for that, the administrative functions then, those functions that involve IT access, questions about navigating Brightspace, outreach for re-engagement, scheduling office hours, administrative functions could be best handled by someone dedicated to just those functions. And we'll call that a per-course course coordinator, which is a little hard to say, but this is not a per-course instructor, but rather someone that's just focused on the administrative functions of the class, whereas the course content functions, the science and content questions that require a professor's input, are best handled in that way. And also new content development, as this type of a class, as I said, needs to be updated continuously. So the professor then is involved with student interactions, office hours, Zoom meetings, and in this way, this division of labor makes scalability possible. So I'd be really interested to see how this management plan might function for other large enrollment STEM courses. So if you're teaching a large enrollment STEM course, I'd be interested in talking with you more about this. Next, I mentioned that very few universities have gen ed courses on biotechnology. So one of the interns, Megan Stanovich, who is a co-author on the poster, did this survey of different universities throughout the Northeast. And what we see is indeed very few universities have a gen ed biotechnology course for majors and non-majors, with the one exception of Stony Brook. And I want to get back in touch with them to see how they do this. But the rest of everybody else, they have upper level courses on biotechnology, upper level courses on biomedical engineering, but really nothing at the general level for majors and non-majors. And like I said, this is the important cohort. Otherwise, you're just preaching to the choir. So how can this course be offered more broadly? Well, there are several suggestions to increase dissemination and enrollment, including inter-university enrollment. The courseware is readily available and entirely transferable across various LMS systems. We've done this in Brightspace, as I just showed you, but we've adapted this. It was in Sakai, but other LMS systems too. So if you're interested in this course and you'd like to maybe offer this at your university, please contact me about that. Or if you'd be interested to team teach this with me at your university, I'd love to hear from you about that too. And I'm actually looking ahead for the next version, which I would like to do including guest lecturers. It's always being improved, right? So I think what we've learned here is that the large enrollment asynchronous course for issues in biotechnology has been thoroughly designed, built, and tested. And I think by all measures is successful. The comparative analysis between the live and the online versions show entirely similar learning outcomes across all three modalities, even right down to the polling questions and student engagement. And the management plan shows a cost-effective way to present this course to a large enrollment that is scalable. So we can enroll 500 and more students handily. So lastly, I'm interested to hear from you. If you'd like to learn more about issues in biotechnology or team teach this class with me, I'm handing out and making available this exit survey. So if you're interested to learn more about this course, or perhaps presenting this at your university, please get in touch with me through this exit survey, or just email me. And if you'd be interested to contribute as a guest lecturer, I'd really like to hear from you, and you can, at this point, choose your topic from the table of contents I showed earlier. And if you'd be interested to utilize or collaborate on any of these improvements of the courseware, also get in touch with me about that. So I've really enjoyed sharing this with you, and hope to hear back from you. And I want to thank again the University of Rhode Island and the ATL for hosting this conference. And I especially want to thank the people in ATL that helped facilitate getting the course approved for the national QM standards. Joanna Portman Daly especially for her role in leading a camel through the eye of a needle, so to speak. She just did a tremendous job of organizing the course to meet national standards. And Jennifer Moniz, who is a whiz at putting this material into Brightspace, and Katie Paparelli, who was involved with organizing the interactive study guide questions into that version. And to Christine Word, who has made a tremendous contribution to the efforts of getting this together. And to the URI undergraduate UTAs and interns that helped out with the 2023 presentation and the data that is in that poster presentation. And I also want to acknowledge the videographers who have contributed to the different edited versions over the years. More recently, Henry Mullen, and then Thaddeus Weaver, and going back further, Dana Nugent, for their contributions here. And to the founding board of directors from Life EDU that helped get this whole thing started way back when. And you can see that there are a number of people on the founding board that were from the University of Rhode Island, and some of who are still on the faculty at the University of Rhode Island. And I want to send a special thanks to them. So thank you again for this opportunity to tell you about this course. And I've really enjoyed it. And again, thank you very much. Yeah. But that's why it's a little bit like, I'd be sweating it all out, you know? Yeah. And how many times have I done it wrong and then you lose everything? No. This version is beautiful. It was perfect. I would say perfect.
Where is your thing?
Oh, don't tell me. Don't tell me. It wasn't recording.
Well, where is it?
I don't know.
I didn't see it.
Oh, fuck me. You're kidding. You hit the button before you left.
I did.
Oh, Jesus. There it is.